Hello, World Economic News for Woden's Day. Right. These GDP revisions, I've been playing with them, but I'm sick of them now, so this is the end of it for a while. They were big revisions, and they went back a long way. The red line on this opening chart are those revisions, and the blue dotted line are the pre-revisions. I know that because it says so. And as you can see, the actual revisions make the whole recession thing an awful lot deeper than the pre-revision recession things said it was. That's it. But from this one, now you can see that the GDP number, numerical number, is still below the number it was back in 2007. 4 years on. So it just really, these revisions go to show that the United States has been in a bigger recession than formally announced. Okay, my figures that I did last night, over on the bottom right, I've got difference, deflator, annual, and ex-fuel, and all that sort of stuff. But when it really comes down to it, the deflator that they use for working out the GDP isn't as naughty as I suspected it might have been. Looking at 2011, it's only 0.3 out. We're only halfway through the year, so it's hard to tell. 2010 was only 0.1 out. 2009 and 8 was so confusing in the data that was coming in. I think we can ignore those. And if we go quickly up the others, 0.2, 0.4, 0.5, 0.2, 0.8, 0.7, generally the deflator is lower than the inflation number, but normally it's only 0.3, 0.4, but it does make a difference. Number 3 is Rebecca Wilder, again pushing out these wonderful charts. Anytime I see a wonderful chart now, I just look to the top to see who's responsible for it, and it's normally Rebecca Wilder that's either made it or found it. I'm starting to fall in love with Rebecca Wilder. Must find out who she is. Anyway, News and Economics gives us this one. It's quite good. These are the PMIs, the Purchasing Managers Index, that I blather on about all the time. For the US, which is the background blue colour, and you can see that's falling away nicely, if you like that sort of thing. Germany, France, China, UK, and Eurozone area. You can see basically they're all falling away. They had the idea at the start of 2011 that things were going to be nice, and now they don't. And the vertical bars are the quantitative easing from the Federal Reserve. The tall bar that goes right the way to the top is when one is announced, and a shorter bar is when they stop that actual round of quantitative easing, roll over, reinvesting the bonds or whatever they've bought, but basically finish. And then the QE2, you can see there, is the second big bar, and the shorter bar is where QE2 has finished. And there is presumed correlation between the PMIs and the quantitative easings, but I think it's a bit of a bridge too far for the moment. But I would say that if they went for QE3, then I would agree, yeah, the PMIs would go up again. Totally illogical maybe, but they would go up again. Right, number 4 is just a bit from Barry Ritholt's blog. As I noted in January, the housing slump is worse than during the Great Depression. As CNN Money points out today, Walmart's core shoppers are running out of money much faster than they did a year ago due to rising gasoline prices, and the retail giant is worried. That's it basically. The recession is still going on for an awful lot of people in the United States and perhaps around the world. But there are worse things going on. Now, I went on in a silly way about Syria being hard. in the beginning, but this Syrian tanks launch fresh attack on city of Hama is just getting a bit too much, quite frankly. It's just that Syria is so out of the way, they can't really go in and slap them. And it's not that the economy is such a basket case that it wouldn't react to sanctions, but there's not a lot you can do about these people. But sending tanks in to fire on protesters is just not cricket. In China, I think this is of great interest, but it's hard to know what to say about it. Foxconn to replace workers with 1 million robots in 3 years. So Foxconn, I think, are Taiwanese actually owned, but it doesn't matter. They've got over 1 million workers in China. It's an awful lot of workers. Now, they're going to replace workers with 1 million robots. They've got very few robots at the moment. They were relying on the cheap labour in China. But labour over the last 2 or 3 years has got a little bit more expensive. So Foxconn are going to replace them basically with robots. Now, the Chinese government has got a big call to make here to say no, because what are we going to do with unemployed Foxconn workers? Or kind of say, okay, let's push it through and say yes, and we'll but you can see their problem. The last thing that China needs is an unemployment problem, but they must maintain Foxconn. If they kick Foxconn out, that's 1 million jobs they've lost. It's one of these horrible political things, but basically it looks like what the Chinese, in shorthand, the Chinese workers, by going to 2 bowls of rice a day, have priced themselves out of the market. And that's pretty sad. Cyprus SOS, Financial Times. I don't need to go into it, just to restate that Cyprus is now heading towards asking for a bailout. It's a very odd place, Cyprus. Holiday destination and banking, but let's just say grey banking. And Joe in the comments, 7B here. Now, this is the same Joe that goes on and on and on about how moronic MMT is. But he notes here, just this little comment, is there a Russian translation of this available? Because the grey banking involves quite a lot of Russian people. Ambrose Evans Pritchard in Tuesday's Telegraph is beautifully succinct, a really short article, which is best because he can't write for toffee. Italy is the best victim of an entirely inappropriate monetary policy. The country needs ultra-loose money, loose belt, trousers, to the ground, low interest rates, very low interest rates. And easy money, just as easy as you can get money out there would be the idea from a macro percentive, whatever the word is. 48 billion of fiscal tightening to stave off a bond crisis. Instead it gets this from the Banco d'Italia, and this is M1, M2 and M3 all below zero. All the money, small money supply numbers going negative. And Ambrose writes, brilliant brain, but shocking at writing, really odd. The ECB policy risk, again, shocking reading. The ECB policy risks a global systemic crisis. Correct. Italy has a public debt of 1.84 trillion euro, the world's third largest after US and Japan. Let that sink in. That's big. Fairly or not, Italy and Spain are chained together in this storm. So the problem is in reality is even bigger. Absolutely, it's. I've said it. It's. We can continue to say it. It's so very important now that Italy and Spain are chained together, because if Spain has problems, it's inconceivable that Italy will just stand by and spend big money to save Spain, and Vicky Verka, Spain will not stand by and just spend big money to save Italy. They are now working chained together. They are twins. The pair must be treated as a single unit in systemic financial terms. Absolutely. And each of them, the two of them, have got different types of problems. So they've got to be dealt with together, meaning all those different types of problems have got to be dealt with, but all at the same time. German M3 is growing at 8%, completely different to Italy. But surely the ECB is not going to set policy for German needs and blow up the European financial system in the process. Or is it? This is again, Germany must sacrifice for the greater Europe. Europe's sovereignty crisis, Joschka Fischer. Introducing him, Joschka Fischer, Germany's foreign minister and vice-chancellor from 1998 to 2005, and was the leader of the German Green Party for almost 20 years. He's one of them. In this article, Berlin. Finally, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has accepted a new form of European Union. More than ever, the EU must combine greater stability, financial transfers, and mutual solidarity if the entire European project is to be prevented from collapsing under the weight of the ongoing sovereign debt crisis. Nothing we haven't heard before, but I'll go back to it. It's really quite important. It's stressing the enormous tipping point that Europe has come to. Finally, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has accepted a new form of European Union. More than ever, the EU must combine greater stability, bollocks, financial transfers, that's the one he wanted to slip in, and mutual solidarity, if the entire European project is to be prevented from collapsing under the weight of the ongoing sovereign debt crisis. It's a huge tipping point, and it must go towards financial transfers or collapse. Later we get, if the euro is to survive, genuine integration with further transfers of sovereignty to the European level will be unavoidable. This historic step cannot be taken through the bureaucratic back door, but only in the bright light of democratic politics. The EU's further federalisation enforces its further democratisation. They don't half talk some crap, these politicians. EU's further federalisation enforces its further democratisation. If the Eurozone is to endure, a majority of its citizens, especially in Germany and France, must embrace the euro as their currency. That's just code for saying something. Of course, embrace it. It's only been their currency for 10 years. They're not going to love it. They use it. But embrace it? What's he talking about? This is not a technocratic issue, but a profoundly political and democratic one. It's certainly a political one. To paraphrase Bill Clinton, it's the sovereignty, stupid. Therefore, the first step must be to ensure a strong role for national parliaments in this process. Therefore, the first step must be to ensure a strong role for national parliaments in this process. Strong role for national parliaments to go with further transfers of sovereignty to the European level. It's just tricky talk, isn't it? But that's the tipping point. It's absolutely at a tipping point. And they're forcing this tipping point. It's either going to be national parliaments voting for further integration for transfers of sovereignty to the European level, or they're going to say it's like one of these more of this blackmail, this new way of doing politics, this great blackmail thing, The TARP was blackmail. This debt ceiling thing, they're using blackmail. And now they're going to break themselves by all going to one side or the other. It's either going to be a complete breakup of the European Union, or it's going to be these further transfers of sovereignty to the European level. Take your sides for the great breakup of the European whatever was it? The European what? I don't know.